Hi YouTube, welcome to my Powder stream. Today I'll be discussing how to ascend in the game Powder 118. This is a very fun game. It's gotten me through a lot of sticky situations in life, and as a result I'd like to create a guide to sort of help clarify some of the gameplay aspects. I've actually pre-recorded this run, and without further ado, I'll go ahead and start and just kind of walk through various aspects of the game as they present themselves. So one of the first things that I'd like to touch on is the god system. The god system is an incredibly important part of the game. There are 7 gods in total, one of which is just the base adventurer type, and then there's Klaskov. He's very easy to please. You basically just kill anything and he'll be happy about that. There's Ruth, the Horse Lord god. He also likes it when you kill things. Although he will get incredibly angry if you cast a spell. And furthermore, there's Belweir the wizard. There's Quasar the rogue. There's Xom, which is a particular favorite of mine. He can definitely work massively in your favor, or definitely just basically give you nothing for an entire level, which can be very detrimental to a run. And then there's Falosh and Pax. Falosh is the necromancer god, and Pax is sort of the healer god. So you'll notice during this run, I initially pick up a ring of polymorph, and I pretty much immediately put it on, which is kind of lucky because I just immediately turn into a whirlwind or an air elemental. I'm not able to equip anything, but I use this form to scan the floors and go through and just get items. It's actually pretty cool. It's not often you'll actually get a lucky run like this, but I firmly believe that even in the early game, you can pretty much turn any run in your favor, especially being able to dance with monsters. So, like zombies, for example, you're able to go move 2 moves, and then you essentially get a free move against the zombie. One thing to note about this game is that there are neutral enemies that you don't actually even have to fight, like kiwis, for example. I can't tell you how many runs I've had just kind of collapse because I've encountered a kiwi in the wild. But fortunately, that's not going to be an issue for me here because I have 68 health and 20 armor as an air elemental. I'm not able to regenerate in this form, however I use it just long enough to explore the initial levels and get all the items from these levels, which puts me at a considerably great head start. So another big part of this game, you'll notice I'm picking up items that are just kind of generic items, and every run the items will be randomized, so certain potions will do certain things, certain rings will do certain things. Eventually, I'm going to somehow identify these items, so of course I've already picked up and identified a ring of polymorph, which is nice. I'm not able to put it on in this form because air elementals don't have any slots, but I do know what a ring of polymorph is. And there are different strategies that can be used to identify things. Putting like a ring on is one such way. You can also just straight up read scrolls, and the best scroll to get is a scroll of identify, because what that allows you to do is just not have to identify things. You can also get a Tome of Divination, but keep in mind that if you do cast a spell, then Haruth and possibly even Xom will get angry at you. And while I'm on that subject, the way Xom works is he alternates the behavior through the behavior of all the different other gods. So, and he'll even give you a message if you are a current follower of him. So that's basically just how he works. But back to identification. So with wands, one of the best thing to do is to stand in a doorway, especially if you haven't already identified a wand of create monster, and you can zap the wand, and if it's a ray, hopefully it won't come back and hit you. You can actually kind of predict how any potential ray would bounce back, and if it does nothing, then at that point you might want to cast it on yourself, because there's not a lot of wands that don't produce rays that produce negative effects. I believe the only thing that actually does that is possibly Wand of Polymorph or Wand of Slowness. But polymorph is a very fun part of this game. So you can polymorph items, and you can also polymorph yourself. With the Ring of Polymorph does this, but if I had a Wand of Polymorph, I could also accomplish this. You'll notice just then I encountered a floating eye, and I neglected to fight it because it can paralyze you, and that's actually kind of bad. That can actually, even in such a strong form, can actually end a run, unfortunately. So that's the basic strategy for wand identification. And there are a couple other things, like the helmets, right? You can get Helm of Draining, which will actually drain your mana. And you can also get a Helm of Warning, which will warn you about monsters. I would generally say that helms are actually worth putting on if you haven't already identified them. And shoes, too. Shoes are a powerful aspect of this game. So if you get shoes, you can get jump boots. And jump boots are kind of OP. They allow you to jump over things. Speaking of jumping over things, you can see right now I'm literally just flying over the water as an air elemental. It's one of the great things about this form. I was actually kind of really lucky to roll an air elemental as my polymorph target. Usually you'll turn into something like a mouse, and then you'll have to suffer the 10% HP drain that happens when you actually kind of die in a polymorphed or possessed form. So this initial part of the game, I basically just go through the dungeon and pick up all the items in the initial levels. You'll see that I employ a strategy of gaining XP once I transform back into my original form, which just happened. So I kind of slow down, and I check my bearings, I put all my items on, and then I seek really low level targets to fight, because basically anything grants quite a bit of XP at this point in time. So it's just smart to fight low level. Even mice grant like 100 XP, which is kind of insane. Of course, later on, when you're at a higher level, then you won't get such great XP rewards. So I put a scroll in my hand, and it ends up cursing me because it's evil. So it welds itself to my hand, essentially. And you can get holy items. You can eventually get to a point where you have essentially an infinite stack of holy water, because you're able to dip the stack of water. You're able to get as much water as you want, because you can just dip bottles in a pool of water, much like the one on screen, and you can just dip that in a bottle of holy water and essentially continue that process for all of your items, because you can just dip an item in a holy water bottle and of course, you have as many holy water bottles as you want. So this is a way to negate the BUC status. One thing about artifacts is even if you dip them in a bottle of acid, they don't actually go away. So what I believe I do here is I polymorph myself, and wait, no, that's a ring of light, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I think I polymorph myself and it essentially forced myself to drop the scroll and realize it's cursed, of course. What a lucky polymorph against that bug. Unfortunately, the XP reward is greatly diminished by the fact that I'm actually a higher level in this form, but it's still nice to at a low health just kind of polymorph. That does mean that I'll have to deal with it when I return to my normal form, though, which happens after a random amount of turns. So it looks like you have a lot of item slots in this game, but when you get to the later levels and you have like 10 rings in your inventory, or like 10 scrolls, 20 wands, then it can actually get rather hard to manage inventory, and you have to leave some what would otherwise be valuable items behind in order to correctly build a working inventory. And I'm just eliminating low-level targets, things that would be a problem when I return to my base form. There are some monsters that are just basically free XP, like a certain rats, like a mouse is just basically free XP. You can hit it in a certain way and pretty much always take it out. It's basically 100% chance to kill. Um, I would consider a Lux to be one of these monsters because all it can do is blind you, and once it blinds you, it's not able to damage you anymore. So you can basically hit it for as many turns as you want until it can blind you again. So that's the basic strategy of fighting a Lux, is to kind of just let it attack you. If your health is too low, if you can't take like 5 damage, then go walk into a room and dance with it for a bit, and uh, then continue to fight it. I don't believe they regen either, so... And that's one thing to consider, is the intrinsics of the monster that you're fighting. Like, red dragons are immune to fire. Blue dragons are immune to electricity. This can be a fun game. It's kind of deep sometimes. So here I was able to identify the fact that I have a ring of polymorph control, which is incredibly fortunate. And this is, of course, where the run actually came to a head. I beat the early game in finding this. So I transform myself into a kiwi in order to drop everything. And now I no longer have to carry a cursed scroll around, and so when I transform back into my base form, which will happen a lot faster due to the fact that I have a ring of polymorph and polymorph control on, then I'll just be able to equip a weapon, and that will hit. to hit dice and hit dice are kind of important here. So whatever weapon you're carrying will, once you've identified it, tell you how much damage you do per turn. And there are things that affect your to hit dice. So, for example, if you have a skill, let's say you're carrying a warhammer, which is one of my favorite weapons. It's the highest two-handed weapon in the game. It will affect how often you hit. If you have a skill like large weapons or bashing, these skills synergize with the weapon, and also knowing your weapon will affect your to hit dice. There's a lot of small mechanics in the game that add up to an overall experience, and the mechanics behind this game are really the main point I'm trying to explain, because it's so fun to explore the mechanics of the game. It's really the heart of this game is where it's at, is understanding the mechanics, and once you do, it's just so fun. This is the game that got me into roguelikes. I'm kind of a big fan of Cogmind, NetHack, a couple other roguelikes, but this is my first one, and it's always held a special part in my heart. So I'm just doing some basic inventory management. So one thing worth mentioning is the satiety system. You can actually become full in this game, which is kind of an overpowered intrinsic. If you continuously eat things and consume corpses, then you can enter the full status, which heals you 1 HP per round, and this can be a massive boon to any potential fight. You see that I'm continuously consuming as many corpses as I can in order to potentially attain the full status. I actually do consider it rather unwise to have fought that scorpion. However, it's nice to have the XP. At 7 HP, it's not really a wise fight. One thing to kind of do during a run like this is to use the look function. So if you look at an enemy that you're warned about, then you'll be able to get your relative level to them. You'll be able to parse your relative level. It'll tell you, oh, it's a strong character, it's a even fight. You can literally just polymorph into yourself, so that's what I did. And here you can see me demonstrating the dancing with an enemy a little bit in order to heal. And I ended up getting healed by Klaskov. One of the things that can happen is you can just get healed by a god if they like you, and you have enough piety points. One thing to consider, though, is if the gods hate you, then they can just smite you or polymorph you into a rat, and like sometimes they can even ruin a run. So one of the major things to consider is how to get the gods to like you, essentially. I'll go ahead and link in the description how, or just the wiki for the different gods. That way you can see all the hit dice and everything that each of the god entails. So I'm already physical level 5. I haven't received any magic levels yet, though. And I have an amazing inventory right now because I started as an air elemental, essentially. It was a really lucky roll. Each run has its own strategy, so a ring of polymorph can definitely be very overpowered. especially if you use it correctly or you roll correctly, essentially. Um, the thing about polymorph rings is you don't want to sit there and kind of roll for a polymorph form because you'll run out of satiety points. You'll become hungry and you won't be able to regenerate, which is honestly kind of terrible. When you're exploring the dungeon, you want to have as high satiety as possible. Of course, if you're full, you won't be able to eat anything. One thing to note about that is when you're using potions, you can actually throw them directly upwards, and they'll come back and uh, essentially just hit you. What that means is you can use potions while you're full. Let's say you're low on HP and you have a heal potion that's identified, and you're full though. Well, you can just throw it in the air. It'll come back down directly and smash you. So this is pretty cool. I don't go directly next to the mouse because he'll actually start to chew me, but I am one tile away, so anytime that I hit him or I miss, then I just essentially have him go to the next tile, and he doesn't get to roll a hit against me because of the fact that he follows either the left or the right wall depending on his current direction. It's kind of an interesting monster. He did spawn as a legendary monster, which is what that exclamation point was. And so this is one of the pivotal points of the run as well. I found out that my chainmail is capable of digging, which grants access to a lot of great gameplay strategy. Of course, I'm not able to dig directly into this area, but I think here I find out how to teleport control, and then I just teleport inside of this room. So, with the Helm of Warning, you can see where monsters are, and this will actually tell you a lot about the structure of rooms around you. So, sometimes you'll encounter a room with a bunch of blue dragons in it, and usually this is if it has three blue dragons, it's generally a mirror shield room. Or let's say you encounter a room with three kiwis in it, in the base room. This is generally a secret room. It'll contain a hidden door, which you can find using the search function. Just press S, and there will be a few items just kind of laying there. It's kind of nice to know about that. Kiwis are honestly a little bit annoying because if you encounter a kiwi, then most of the time when you encounter a kiwi, you've just entered a black or a fog of war tile, and when you're going through fog of war tiles, it's kind of easy to just spam one of the keys, and so that's why I'm saying that kiwis are not the most fun monster to encounter. But it does add to the suspense of the game. Essentially, being able to be taken out by monsters at any time it makes the game fun, because when you win, it's more rich. You know that you've overcome all these obstacles, and you've you know accomplished a challenge. So I think here I transform into a bat because I'm given the option, and that gives me the speed intrinsic. Which allows me to quickly get away from this frog. This frog is rather powerful, and I don't want to fight it if I can get away with it. Yes, I transform into a bat, and because I'm quicker than the bat, but I also want my chainmail, then I just quickly run away from the bat. The frog, that is, as a bat. There's a real vampire moment here. And so it should give me the ability to... I use that hole to teleport on the next level, but it doesn't get me that far. So I'm just going to trap this guy into one of these rooms. So one thing about the frog is it does have the jump ability naturally, and so that means even if you're quick, you'll have a hard time avoiding it. And I close the door on it, which is cool. Tridudes are pretty much always hostile. So knowing how to dance with enemies like this and essentially control them to your favor is very powerful. So here you can see that I just left the tridude in his own little area. I decided that that was the best strategy. And I just wait. I wait for my polymorph to either allow me to transform into myself or wear off. And this bug here is not naturally hostile, so he just dances around me during this process. Here I'm kind of devising what strategy I'm going to use to get around the frog. So it can take quite a while to transform back into your base form. And now that I'm back in my base form, I might be able to just take the frog head on. However, that's not an encounter I want to risk right now. What I can do is I can just use my chainmail or use certain strategies against the frog. I also want to get the XP that this tridude offers, so... Here I'm kind of baiting the frog with my noise, because I'm wearing chainmail and a couple other loud items. I do not want to fight this guy right now, so I just kind of run away from him. I learned that this is a wand of... yeah, a wand of frost. You can see here I freeze the Zimzum, the frog. What I'm really looking for here is a wand of fire, because frogs are vulnerable to fire, which means they take extra damage. And that's always nice. And so the Wand of Create monster that I mentioned earlier, the imp was created using the Wand of Create monster. Of course, it does have the Fireball spell, and so if I can get it to kind of proc on the frog, then the frog is not going to last very long. And now, of course, I'm kind of scared of the imp because I only have 11 HP, but then I get healed by God, and it's no longer a problem. So I consume its corpse and go along with my merry day. Just continue to grind for XP. That is another thing that can happen. So what just happened there was I actually got an enchant on one of my weapons, on the weapon I was currently holding, and you can actually have it basically infinitely stacked with piety points. Achieving piety points without causing one god to really dislike you, though, is kind of hard because, like, for example, Pax hates it when you hit things, and the primary way to level is to actually kill things. So, unless you're using healing spells with your allies, then you're probably gonna have to hit things. Um, so that's just one thing to consider. Is the gods are a very heavy RNG aspect of this game, and um, in order to please the gods, actions that are good to take are finding traps, creating traps, and then finding them. Identifying wands of trapping even helps with Quasar. He also likes it when you find doors. Um, and as you play the game, I'm sure it'll become more apparent how finding doors works. It's honestly kind of simple. Like if you're at the dead end of a hallway, you'll generally just want to press the S key and, at least 4 times to see if there's a door there. So, whatever entity you end up killing, you can polymorph control yourself into, which is kind of fun. I could, for example, polymorph control myself into a frog, which would give me the jumping intrinsic. But the reason I want to stay in my base form right now is that I can take advantage of XP gains and level myself up. So, fire elementals are really, really strong. They're uh, kind of late game. I think I got that because I'm currently following Zom. Or wait, no, I'm not following Zom. I'm just kind of high level right now, so they can spawn. Um, you'll never be able to naturally fight a Kiwi. They're actually an ally of yours. The game considers them an ally. But you can always cast a spell at them or take the attack option from the menu and just force combat, essentially, which I wouldn't recommend doing because they're kind of strong. And here I think I find a ghost. Ghosts are fun. Or that might be an invisible stalker, which is also fun. At some point in this run, I transition into teleport control, which, by the way, I just put on a ruby necklace. The thing about necklaces is one of the types of necklace is strangled, and it almost always spawns in the evil status. So if you put on a necklace, it can pretty much immediately end your run unless you have acid potions or scroll of remove curse. If you do have these things, of course, then it's actually advisable to put a necklace on, because if it's not a necklace of an amulet of strangulation, then it's guaranteed to be a good amulet. So acid dragons could be a lot of not fun, and I just dig around the place that it's in order to locate everything around the base here and, just get some intel. And it's rather unfortunate that I never took advantage of that one room. I, I'm not certain if I ended up teleporting into that room because I do transition into teleport control and use all sorts of cool teleport strategies. So invisibility is one of the greater intrinsics that you can get. Right now I'm invisible, but I can also feel myself because I'm wearing a crown, a warning crown, and this essentially means that all the monsters that I encounter won't naturally be aggroed towards me. And I find a nice little cache here with an artifact in it. It's kind of nice. A book. Books are definitely super powerful. If you have a wand of polymorph, then books are kind of OP. Definitely want as many books as I can get. Learning skills, learning spells is a great way to become incredibly powerful very quickly. Learning early on how to wield your weapon, like blunt attacks or large weapons, for example, can mean the difference between a good run and a run that doesn't last long. Being able to hit the enemy is kind of important. So here I can just become an invisible stalker if I wanted to. But of course, that would mean that I don't get to take advantage of the XP gains in my base form, so I don't end up doing that. But it's just a fun thing to think about, is becoming naturally invisible without the aid of wands. And here I'm checking the logs and observing all the different strategies that are available to me. This level 10 here always spawns completely barren. If you are invisible, it's useful to just pick up all the items on this level and then go to the next one. It's kind of like a free source of items. It's kind of nice. So I do want to fight some of these weaklings because they end up giving me some XP. Um, what I'd love to find at this point is probably something that gives me jumping, and I can just turn into an invisible stalker and not have to waste wand charges, which I definitely do during this level. Imps can still see you if you're invisible, but they're one of the only things that, other than like an invisible stalker, that are capable of doing so. Um, I pick up everything that I see that's worth taking, and then I go to the next level. If I remember correctly, these two amulets that I have are life saving amulets, which I end up using to defeat. Well, you'll see. I don't want to spoil it. It's pretty great though. This was definitely a fun run. I would say that RNG can be kind of heavy in this game, so if you encounter certain things, then they can just end your run, like a vampire bat. Unless you have speed, unless you have the fast intrinsic, you're probably not going to be able to defeat a vampire bat at level 1. The rolls are just strongly against your favor. And it can happen. You can encounter a vampire bat, so there are strategies to not encountering a vampire bat, like not entering a forest, for example. That's kind of a good strategy to employ. Another thing is to be wary if you're a follower of Zom and he laughs, then that means that the current generation, the monster generation for that floor, is completely randomized rather than the normal monster generation pattern. You can encounter things like fire elementals or even iron golems. And so if Xom does laugh, then the best advice is just to leave the level as soon as possible. That way you reset the way the level is generated. Unless you want to fight super high level monsters. In which case I don't blame you. Green dragons are kind of interesting. So what they can do is, if you eat their corpse, they can grant regeneration. But if they hit you, then they give you the deadly poisoned intrinsic. And that's, unless you have a poison resistance amulet, that's really bad. It deals a ton of damage every turn, and also when it wears off, it also deals a pretty incredible amount of damage. So I just transform back into myself here. That way I can take advantage of the 817 XP that I have. It does translate over forms, so you can, if you have a setup like mine, you can just actually transform between forms. I want to mention here, I kind of have beat the mid game at this point, because I was able to find a scroll of identify with a full inventory. And now I know what everything is. Because I know what everything is, I'm considerably more powerful now. I'm able to restructure my build immediately and take advantage of all the properties of the items that I have. So and here I find the ring of teleport control. Ah, yes. What a powerful ring. So if you have a ring of teleport and a ring of teleport control, it essentially means that at any random interval, you'll be able to, for free, teleport anywhere on the map of your choosing. And if you know the right spots to teleport, then it can get you out of bad situations, it can put you in good situations, and so even if you have a wand of teleport, that's even better, because you can teleport at will and go wherever you like. It's like having a holy scroll of teleport. It's kind of OP, honestly. So this is definitely one of the things that are worth looking out for in a run. You don't normally get this early on. I might still call this mid game, but right now player character is incredibly powerful in terms of what's capable, because of course I have the scroll of identify, and I know what a lot of the most powerful things in the game are, so and here I start taking advantage of the leap of jumping. So in order to do this, I just hold down the Alt key, and whenever I encounter something, then I can just navigate around it if I want to. You can jump over monsters. There's a lot of strategies that you can employ with jump. So here I follow Xam. I want to take a little bit of a gamble with my levels because Xam can grant a lot of HP and magic per level, and magic is nice to have. It's definitely worth going for. I wouldn't recommend during the early levels actually casting a spell, because the moment you do, Haruth is guaranteed to be angry at you, and also if Xam is currently Haruth, if he's currently emulating Haruth, then he'll also just straight up become angry with you. There's also it's also worth considering if you're using necromancy or healing spells, because either Flush or Pax will become angry with you. These are known as forbidden spells. But none of the god shenanigans will matter at all if you're an adventurer. It's essentially like being an atheist, so to say. And I think it's even referenced in the game as being an atheist. So, what I like to kind of imagine the gods as is kind of delusions that the adventurer has. He puts himself through challenges in order to build himself up, kind of like weightlifting, right? So when you lifting weights, you want to lift very strong weights and tear your muscles, thereby giving you the ability to repair them and come back as a stronger person. And in the same way, I think the adventurer is kind of going through that psychologically, because the main point of this game is to actually go to the depths of hell and to carry the devil's heart in order to get out of this dungeon. So, according to the lore of this game, a lot of other people, a lot of other adventurers have done this to no avail. And it's just interesting to think about the lore of this game, and that sort of thing. So here I'm reading, or I'm polymorphing my staff, and holding a staff in your hand gives you the spells without having to read a book. And that's kind of powerful. So I think I settle on a staff of death, which gives me the ability to gastify. There's also a staff of healing, which would allow me to read my healing book and just know how to resurrect without having to know the prerequisite skills. It's kind of powerful because it doesn't consume as many spell slots. Therefore, I don't have to level up as many times in order to achieve the resurrect spell. So one of the things that I kind of glossed over earlier is the fact that I encountered a cockatrice. There was this yellow bird that I encountered some time ago, and it has the ability to harden you. It's one of the things that can end your run immediately, and I wouldn't recommend fighting it if you can avoid it at all costs. It will turn you into a stone statue and thereby end your run, unless a god saves you or you have a I don't know if an amulet of life saving can actually negate that. I don't think it can. If you have an amulet of unchanging, though, then it will actually completely negate. You can also use, in order to stop the hardening attribute, you can use an acid potion or a cure potion, and this will make it so you don't turn into a statue. Cure potions are incredibly valuable, especially against green dragons or I think they're called death slugs. Yeah, death slugs. Both of which can poison you. So one of the fun things about jumping is if you get a book of Haruth, you can learn leap attack, and that makes it so that you can leap into the square that an enemy is and actually deal damage to it as well. It's very powerful. I've used it to win a lot of runs. So this is level 15, and dungeon level 15 always contains the Minotaur. You have to kill the Minotaur if you want to access the 20th level portal, and that's just the tridude level. Tridude level can be a lot of fun. I would recommend getting the heart first if you're going to actually explore it, and then carrying the heart to the tridude level and taking advantage of the hard tridude level. Of course, once you have the heart, you've pretty much won the game anyway, so it's kind of a controversial strategy. So here I'm taking advantage of my teleport wand, and the Minotaur always spawns with an artifact as well, which can be very powerful. So here I get the glowing Y room, which is the key to accessing the tridude level, and it can be a lot of fun. The tridude level, the spaceship, I would be very wary of being teleported by purple tridudes. And that's the reason I recommend carrying the heart, because the heart makes it so that you can't be teleported. But if you have a teleport control, it might be acceptable. You want to drain the purple tridude's teleport as quickly as possible. So you want to drain their mana as quickly as possible, because otherwise they'll continue to fetch you, and they hit very hard and are immune to physical damage, which means you have to use magic against them. One of my favorite strategies is to use a reflective shield or a reflective amulet and force them to take a lot of damage from a wand of either ice or fire. I'll just have it bounce between myself and the wall and deal like 8 times a wand of fire or a wand of ice. This can be incredibly effective against ghosts as well. Ghosts are a lot of unfun. Ghosts are actually vulnerable to fire as well. So if you have a wand of fire, then it helps a lot. So see, here you can see that I've actually gotten to a point where I have to do quite a bit of inventory management, and the reason that I keep some of these clothing items actually is because certain gods have outfits or uniforms that they benefit from. So let's say you put on cloth shoes, cloth robes is what they're called, and a floppy hat, and also have 2 rings on and either a staff or a wand, then you'll get additional mana regeneration. Or let's say you have full plate, you have an iron helm, you have iron shoes, and you also have a tower shield. then you'll get regen, and this can be very, very powerful, especially if you're also full. That can mean that every turn you're actually generating 2 health, and that can definitely turn the tides of battle in your favor. So here, this is one of the rooms I mentioned earlier, the room with all of the blue dragons. It always contains a mirror shield, and I already have reflective, but it's always nice to have a mirror shield. Here you can see I demonstrated the strategy of having the electric dragons shock each other, and they just get kind of locked against each other because they can't actually damage each other, and distracted against me, so I get to leave with my mirror shield, and there's nothing they can do about it. Teleport traps are nice if you have teleport control, because that means that you can just walk into them and go wherever you want. So there are certain things in this game that always generate a certain way. This, for example, is a zoo. It's in the game files. They're called zoos. And what this means, this particular zoo has in the middle door right there a lich. A lich is always generally very dangerous. Here, I don't think I would mind it too much. It might just mean extra HP to me. Sorry, extra EXP to me. But if I was a low level, I might not want to encounter it, because liches are kind of dangerous. They can cast poison rays, and they can also cast lightning. I definitely want to take care of this legendary tridude. Or, no, he's a turtleoid, yes. I'm essentially fighting a ninja turtle right here. It's kind of funny. I use the ray strategy because I'm reflective. I can just deal a pretty great amount of damage per turn. My DPS, so to say, is rather high. I attempt to, because I ran out of my ice charges, I attempt to find another one that's capable of dealing damage in that manner. But I end up just dealing with him in the traditional way. I am actually invisible right now. Ghasts are almost always hostile, but they're not able to see me right now. I am poisoned, and thank goodness I have a cure potion, so I just use it. Because of how low HP I am, I attempt to heal, but thankfully I'm healed by one of the gods. I teleport around this tridude, and I win the battle. It's great. I'm still having to deal with all of the shenanigans related to jumping and teleportation. But it's a lot of fun if you have this set up. So here I continue to polymorph my items. It's a pretty typical strategy. Having a wand of polymorph opens up a lot of potential strategies. I'm just killing these monsters for extra XP. Having as many levels as possible is always nice. I do end up forcing an encounter with a lich. And I just teleport into his room. He still thinks I'm in that room. Not that he has any persistent memory of these things, but yeah, that was pretty easy. I wanted to make it so I wasn't full, so that I could consume his corpse and therefore get the mana boost. When you consume a lich or a kobold mage and you're not full, then, well, of course, you're not able to consume anything if you are full, but you get a boost to your mana. Usually this is like 2 or 3 mana points, and it's kind of nice to have a permanent boost to your available magic capacity. So here I encounter my first purple tridude, and these are rather fun. The reason I don't immediately rush into battle is because of those water elementals. Water elementals will definitely ruin your game. If they hit you, you can become strangled, and for about 200 turns, you'll have to not be able to breathe. If you have an artifact of Breathless or a life-saving amulet like I do, then it's not just immediately game-ending, but it's still pretty terrible. An artifact of Breathless is the best way to negate the effects of a water elemental. You can also enter space if you go to the... Let's say you go underwater or you are in the spaceship level. You can actually dig through the window and just be sucked into space. And if you don't have Breathless, then that can also be game ending. So I'd say ghosts, green dragons, cockatrices, and also water elementals are some of the most dangerous beasts that you can encounter. So this invisible rock troll, he's a stone troll. I end up finding a teleport trap at his location, and that's kind of nice. He just teleports away. Stone trolls are very, very strong. Yeah, I used a wand of trapping against him, actually. A helmet that grants jump. So, this is one of the things that is worth considering if you have a lot of skill slots and you want to forget something like I do here in order to gain more preferable skills, then you can just forget them and learn what that will free up a slot. One of the things that you can get as as an adventurer is you can have an outfit of a barbarian. And what this entails is you have to have a spear in your 2 hands, you have to have either a chainmail, a mithril chainmail, or a studded leather. I think leather also works. You have to have the riding boots specifically, and usually they don't spawn with jump available to them. But if they do, then that's great. and you also have to have the feathered helm on, regardless of what it actually is. So sometimes it can be spawned as draining, and that makes this outfit less preferable. But once you have this outfit, it enables you to move in a diagonal manner, and if it just so happens that riding boots are also jump boots, then it can lead to some pretty good synergies, especially if you have, like I have, a flaming sword, or just something that emits light. Generally speaking, if you have something that emits light, you'll want to be invisible. And this is because monsters will be able to see you from across the map. You don't want to encounter monsters if you don't have to. I mean, unless you want the extra XP that comes along with it. Right now I do have a pretty strong build, so I'm not as concerned about most monsters. Even a green dragon I could just run away from. I have a couple of cure potions. If I encountered a water elemental here, I would be pretty sad about that, but I do have a life-saving amulet. Another thing to consider is if I were to encounter a cockatrice, I would just use an acid potion. So, being that I have a counter for every possible monster here, I'm not as concerned about having an object of light. But it's just something to consider if you're playing, then you'll want to kind of conceal your presence. You can get you can get tracked by an assassin, and what that will mean is that regardless of walls or vision, monsters will always come to your position because they can see you. You can also track monsters using the track spell, which is nice. Another one of the funny things that can happen with kobolds is you can encounter a kobold fighter. A kobold fighter will actually make it so that you drop your in-hand weapon if they parry you. And so that's just something to kind of look out for if you're mashing the button against a kobold fighter. It's definitely possible that you actually no longer have your weapon in hand. It's a lot easier to recognize this immediately because of your player character sprite, no, especially with a flaming sword, but it's a lot less noticeable with something like let's say, a mace. Sometimes I'll have a mace in a game, and kobold fighters are an interesting thing. So, just a bit of inventory management. I do have a lot of really great items here. This was a kind of nice build. I want to stock up on rings, scrolls, potions, and wands for level 21, and what that will let me to do is use the kind of Sudoku mechanic of the room on that floor in order to access the library, Belweir's library. He's the wizard god. So you can see here I don't want to really fight this green dragon. And I think I put on a ring that makes me poison immune, which is great. So I just consume its corpse. It gives me regenning. And of course I'm also full. Having poison res is really nice. It's kind of makes your character OP. It's one of the major fallbacks of late game characters. I love it when the gods just randomly smite me. It's funny. So what just happened was they put in a tribute on me that will continuously drain my magic. It's actually really dangerous to enter the spaceship level like I just did without the heart and without like invisible, because a purple tridude can essentially just fetch me and then start hitting me along with all of his buddies. And I'm even being drained right now, so I don't want to risk an encounter with a purple tridude. I think I am invisible, but I'm also capable of seeing invisible. So I just kind of put everything that I want to preserve on this level. Monsters can't spawn on this level, and item stacks are generally preserved here, so I use this as an extended backpack um, in order to help with inventory management. Next level I should encounter the Bellware's Library. And by the way, I just want to give a spoiler warning for anyone that hasn't encountered Bellware's Library or solved it on their own. It can be a lot of fun to do so, but coming up I will be actually accessing the Bellware's Library, which means that if you want to kind of solve it on your own, I would recommend skipping past that point. So here I have a ring of shock resistance, which means that these guys are not as much of a threat. I'll just be hitting them with physical and fire damage because I have a fire sword. I also have a amulet of reflection, where I think I have a mirror shield currently, actually. And that means that their attacks can't even land. But here it is, the Bellware's Library level. Yep. Oh man, this is such a great run. It was a lot of fun. And oh, that's another fun thing that can happen. So especially with the amulet of reflect or the mirror shield, um, you can end up having monsters aggro against other monsters. So let's say you have a monster behind a monster, but their attack reflects against another monster, and if they hit that monster, then that that monster will start will be aggroed against the original, let's say a dragon in this case. It's kind of funny. It makes it easy to actually run away from monsters that cast spells and breathe different attacks. If you polymorph into a dragon, you can actually use the breathe action in order to get the effect of whatever dragon you're currently polymorphed as. So here, this is the Bellware's Library Sudoku challenge. How I'm solving this is I'm essentially putting all of my wands, my cheapest scrolls, my cheapest wands, my cheapest rings, and of course my least useful potions, and testing where each goes in a Sudoku pattern. So if I have a row or column that already has a potion, then I know that the rest of those rows of columns cannot have a potion or a scroll or so on and so forth. It's kind of mentioned in the flavor text when you attempt to open the door, but yeah, this is how to solve the Sudoku room. It's rather fun. Generally speaking, I like to preserve my rings because rings can be polymorphed and they have permanent intrinsics that are useful. But I have kind of already solved it here, so I'm happy to put my rings down. One thing to note is that you should always be wary of bashing on the keyboards because a wrong move like digging a tile that could have been just an open space with a bunch of monsters, and that would have been slightly annoying. So it's just kind of worth noting. A game like this, the entire world doesn't move until you do. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a scroll of omnipotence, but if I was, this would probably be the place where I would find it. And I actually did one of my runs find a scroll of omnipotence, It can be kind of fun. What it does is whatever you're holding in your hand, it will become an artifact. So you can apply things like, let's say you're holding in your hand Beelzebub's heart. Um, you can actually apply an intrinsic that will permanently go with you for the end of the run. If you make a Beelzebub's heart and an artifact, you can also just make a weapon an artifact. So let's say you have an earth hammer. Um, you can make an artifact that not only digs and deals extra physical damage, but also deals, let's say, sometimes fire damage or acid damage. I would say acid or shock. Maybe even light, or sometimes the most useful damage types. My favorite being acid. It damages pretty much anything except for slugs, and with slugs you can just beat them up with physical anyways. They're not that strong. So, one of the things I like to do, and I actually did with this run, I don't show it on stream because I kind of wanted this to be a tutorial, but I did end up making this run into a immortal tridude character, and how I did that was I possessed a purple tridude in its gastified form and applied 100% of the resistances to it. So a gastified purple tridude will also carry its physical attribute. It's a physical resistant attribute, and most things in this game actually deal physical damage, so you're pretty much immune to everything. And if you have the other resistances like fire resistance, then you're literally immune to everything in the game. Nothing in the game can deal damage to you. It can be a lot of fun, but I don't want to dwell too much on this because it's not particularly relevant to the understanding of the mechanics of this game. So here, this is definitely a great place to stock up on any skills that may be required. One of my favorite skills is actually leap attack, because it allows you to just leap into an enemy and deal damage to it. The enemy will generally be given a turn to kind of counterattack. That makes it so that this skill is not immediately just OP. There are things that are kind of OP. So let's say you have 60 mana and 40 mana, and you go into Adventurer and you have the Stone to Flesh spell. That means that you can infinitely through the run cast Stone to Flesh or Petrify. You would want to, if you have Petrify, then you can cast Stone to Flesh. If you cast Stone to Flesh on a wall, then it becomes a mound of flesh, and this is a great source of food in the game. You don't have to encounter any monsters. You can just kind of consume the walls around you. You can consume the dungeon around you, and pretty much infinitely do whatever you would like in the game. So there are a couple ways to quote unquote break the game. I think they were intended because they add to the flavor and the fun of the game. It's somewhat difficult to set up, and so the start of the game really is honestly one of the most challenging and fun parts of this game. Even though you can break it, it's still a lot of fun. There is still quite a bit of challenge to the game. Although, it is significantly mitigated by the fact that I'm pretty OP right now. Once you get to this level, you can pretty much learn whatever you want, and you can become as powerful as you would so desire. So, so the books do actually have flavor text for every skill and spell in the game. I'm not going to go too deep into the specific mechanics of it. There are a lot of fun spell interactions, though, that I might want to touch on. Specifically, the preserve function allows you to just cast preserve on a corpse. This makes it so that you can, and it only costs 10 mana. It makes it so that you can carry a preserved corpse, and that makes it so you can actually just kill some monster, use its corpse later on, and continue to be full. And I'm sure I've demonstrated how OP the fullness mechanic can be here. Um, Book of Forest can be kind of nice. Being able to possess things in game is also very powerful. It can make it so that if it's your first time casting a spell and you have some piety with Haruth, then you can just make it so that Haruth strikes whatever you possess, and you can kind of dodge the curse that would be instilled. Sometimes like packs will just like straight up smack you in the face with a disintegrate or something, or force bolt. So here, earlier I mentioned the mechanic where you can have infinite holy bottles, and here I'm actually using it. I'm just pressing F to make a few of these items my favorite, and they'll turn up as gold in my inventory. It's a lot more usable now that I can just make anything holy. I did make a scroll of remove curse holy and use it, and so therefore I no longer have any cursed items in my inventory. It helps with inventory management because the way that inventory management works is if you have a holy item, a normal item, or a evil item, then it will be considered its own slot even if you don't know about it. And that's also a kind of way to cheese the ID system. So if you have like 3 swords and then one of them is not stacking with those swords, then you know that one of them must have an attribute that does not stack. So let's say it can be +1, it can also be holy, or it can also be evil. So that's just something to watch out for. Having a scroll of identify is one of the most powerful scrolls you can have. It allows you to get around most of the identification requirements. So here I'm slaying a lot of the blue tridudes, and they're pretty easy because I just have a ring of shock resistance. If you have a resistance, let's say shock, that means that you can negate 100% of the damage you would otherwise take. The necklace there did attempt to strangle me, however, I believe I took it out with an acid potion. Or, oh no, I used a holy water against it, and I was able to remove it because it was no longer cursed. When you have a bottle of holy water, you can just remove cursed items like that, and it's kind of nice. You can continue to polymorph, for example, in this scenario. Here I read a Holy Scroll of Magic Mapping, and it reveals this particular level. So this level can be rather difficult if you don't have the right equipment. Here I am able to walk on water. I'm able to kind of Sudoku these boulders into, or sorry, Sokoban these boulders into an orientation that works for me. One thing about this level is you're not actually able to teleport below this level. So you can see here I actually triggered a teleport trap, and normally I would be able to just teleport control and I would go to the end of the level, but that's not possible here because of the properties of this level. So I do end up just soak-abaning these rocks into their correct position, and they give me a pretty straight path to be able to get access this level, level 23. This is always Ruth's level, the Horse Lord. Here you can see I have a cockatrice, but I'm not too concerned about it because I have all the resistances required to be able to just take it on. Here I believe I encounter a acid dragon, but I polymorph one of my rings into a ring of acid resistance, and then I just test it out. And of course this gives me the ability to fight it without taking anything more than physical damage. And in terms of physical damage, dragons aren't too terribly strong. It's mostly their abilities that make them so terrifying. So, yeah, I just find the correct ring and put it on, and you can see here I ignore the attack, which means I have the resistance to acid. Here I have poison resist, not concerned about green dragons. I just skip around this guy because he's super tough and doesn't give enough XP to make him worth it, so I'm invisible and I don't have to fight him. And here, yes, I do get rather low on HP, but I end up getting healed by one of the gods. I take the Iron Golem out, which is nice. So this is the most scary enemy in the game right now, the Water Elemental. I don't like Water Elementals. They're scary. They're terrifying. You just don't want to fight them unless you have Breathless. Or you have Life Saving, which I do have, it's just I don't want to use it because there's a lot of water elementals. So I just slam the door on the fire elemental, and yeah, I kind of dance with these guys. I am full right now, and I want to heal up as much as possible, so I just continue to eat the corpses of these guys, heal up, and fight them as necessary. So here I'm employing the jump strategy that I mentioned earlier. Of course it is basically the same as just attacking them directly. Um, One of these kobold assassins ended up putting the track spell on me, which means that now both of the fire elementals as well as the kobolds are aware of my presence, and they know how to open doors, so they actually do encounter me. The track spell does not last forever, so I basically just wait for it to wear off. Eventually, the enemies will no longer be aware of my presence, and I can fight them as normal. It's kind of unfair against an enemy to have invisible and quite a bit of HP, especially if you have jumping. That's actually very unfair. Sometimes the gods can just spawn enemies around you. I think it's called spawn nasties. It can be a lot of fun. If you're in a tight corridor, it doesn't matter as much. That Turtleroid there is worth a lot of XP. So I like to fight him if I can. And these guys I can just jump through. I want to keep these guys. The reason being is because they're actually worth a lot of food. They're worth a lot of nutrition. And if I need to come back to the surface for food, then it's nice to have just kind of weak enemies, especially the green orcs. Here I put on water walking and fire resistance, and that gives me the ability to just walk on lava. I do encounter a lich here, but I have a amulet of life saving on, so that's my first amulet that I used up. I don't want to necessarily fight these guys outside of an unfair match, so I just go to the other side. And that kobold over there is the one I mentioned that can just kind of make your weapon drop on the floor when you fight it. It's a lot of fun. If I wasn't full, I would immediately eat this lich. I make sure that I have my life-saving amulet on, and I should move away here, yeah. And I use because I'm able to walk on lava without taking any damage or without consequence. I just do so, and I heal up as I'm full. It's great. Um, so I consider becoming an adventurer here. Um, Becoming a barbarian allows higher level, but if you become an adventurer, then you can cast spells, and that's a lot of fun. So yeah, just becoming a barbarian, and that gives me 2 levels. So, and like I mentioned earlier, this is one of the ghosts. They're not particularly fun. You have to have magic to fight them, but I do, so. They can make you paralyzed and then deal damage for a lot of rounds. It's fortunate that water elemental got aggroed by another creature off screen. I was able to dig into where Beelzebub is, and I'll just kind of let you watch this kind of amazing fight scene. Oh, one thing I do want to mention though, soul suckers can be a lot of fun because they have this spell called Soul Suck, and what it does is it takes all of your skills and spells and makes it so that you can no longer use those skills or spells, and it applies it to the creature itself. So the Soul Sucker will literally gain advantage of all your spells and skills. So here, technically, I've kind of won the game. I do still have to ascend, but this is the end game now. Um, about the soul suckers. If you have a spell that can damage you a lot, or let's say you have this teleport spell, soul suckers can be a lot of unfun. The reason being, once they get low on health, they'll just teleport away. And the reason you really want to kill soul sucker is because they are definitely capable of. So they will generally cast soul suck on you, but if you kill them, then they no longer control your um, your spells. So here I use because I'm strangled, I use a amulet of life saving, but thankfully I don't need it. You should see here later that I will actually use it, and that's just because I'm a very vengeful person. I do not like water elementals at all. I heal pretty much to full. And yeah, this guy. He's a lot of fun. A legendary water elemental. Yeah. So I use some wands against him. He does, of course, strangle me, and I have to use... well, you'll see. Yep. So I use my life saving, and then I just ascend. So this was a lot of fun. This particular run, I definitely enjoyed it a lot. Um, I may link to the immortal tridude character run that I had going. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, this is just a kind of exploration into the mechanics of the game and a simple description of a lot of the misconceptions around this game. It can be hard to get into if you don't have if you don't read the wiki and if you don't read about the gods, especially. That's a huge part of the game. Once you get into it, though, and understand these things, then it is a lot of fun. The last part of the game is essentially a victory lap. You're ascending every level, and eventually you get to the top and meet this village elder, and thereby win the game. So yeah, that's pretty much game right there. So, um, yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.